My name is Alana, and I use they, them pronouns.
And my name is Jessie. I use she, her pronouns.
And we're making menches.
Making Menches is your home for queer, anti-Zionist Jewish ritual, radical education, and community.
Today, I am so excited about this conversation. We are here with Liz Awesome and Jessie Taylor. Liz Awesome is one of the sages, Yitzhak Batya, mediocre teshuva. He creates Judaica, fine art, digital art supplies, and provides creative direction on the Senan land in the name of Bezalel, who built the Mishkan. His favorite mediums are already in the trash can. Post-consumer plastic, story selling, and undervalued corporate structures are the baubles that fuel the power in his creations. He's the proud father of Yaakov ben Liz Vicindi. He kindly asks that you wear a mask to protect his family and hot girlfriend, and is devotedly committed to collective liberation. Liz sells art at lizawesome.art. And Jessie Taylor is a writer, poet, artist, and Torah scholar who Making Menches has been fortunate enough to partner with this year in poetry workshops and Torah study and lots of really cool stuff. So please check out their work on their Linktree and their Instagram at Moontwork. So welcome, Liz. We're so excited to have you. And we'll start with what brought you to creating the art that you create?
It's a compulsion. Art is a way to create longevity in the movement towards collective liberation. And it's something I started a long time ago for my mental health. And then I kept at it. And what I was able to discover as I was working through it was that I had just been fed a lot of lies throughout my education. And we have all been fed these lies, and taking 15 minutes for myself whenever I could to make some marks or do some gestures or something to express that allowed me to create a safe space for myself where I wasn't spewing that on other people, and instead I was taking responsibility for that. And we've never had as much access to information about how people have overcome oppression as we did in 2021. And I've been finding that my position, privileges, and abilities require me to attempt to communicate what we've learned. I was fortunate enough to try to protest the Iraq war by myself. Well, I mean, I was a little bit early. I should have gone to the things that were already arranged, but I couldn't find them in that moment. And I've been trying to watch and learn and join into the community since then. And I really think that I'm holding a lot of knowledge that I need to get out on paper. And that doesn't always come out as words. Sometimes it comes out as how it comes out. And so that's why I create what I create.
How do you think your compulsions and your experiences with figuring out what kind of knowledge you want to pour into your art led you to trash? And what are some of the messages you hope to convey by using trash as your main medium?
I'd always sort of decided that I was going to give everything to the art. Once I started doing it, anything that art needed in my home ended up in my studio. And this last Hanukkah, we're a multi-faith family, and our recovering Catholics' love language is gift giving. So we had a lot of that great brown paper laying around and just some other stuff. And I really started to work with it. And I started to see all of that as a resource that was going out of the house. I think that trash is an incredibly affordable and abundant art supply. And instead of putting it in the landfills on Turtle Island, that we should be hanging it up in billionaires' homes. And so fine art is the mechanism to do that, that we know from history, those great still lifes, you always look at them and you look closely, you'll see gross bugs and decay. Artists have been doing this forever, and it's part of encoding something for future generations. I had an opportunity to visit a community in northern Luzon in the Philippines, and I'll acknowledge that was a little bit of disaster tourism, and it kind of wasn't ethical for me to be there, and I didn't know that at the time. In 2000, in a landfill in the Philippines collapsed. It killed hundreds of people scavenging for resources. And there was a law that was passed that required that landfills be closed. And so local communities had to figure out how to deconstruct their landfills and what to do with all of that stuff. And I had a chance to see what they had done there in Luzon. And part of what they were doing was reclaiming trash and making art out of it. And it was really unusual art. And we see it all over the place now. It's a great divine way to respond to capitalism, I think. There in Luzon, the phrase posters they had painted all over the walls to try to get the community involved in this was there's money in trash. And so as I was looking through what we were going to throw away for Hanukkah and it wasn't going to fit in our small garbage can, there was negative money in throwing the trash away. And then there was money in creating junk journals and resources and art for myself. And so that's kind of what got me really hooked on it. And then Joann's closed and we saw all those people online say, oh, I can't continue with my art without Joann's because I need to go and I need to touch the fabric and I need to really have this experience. And y'all, that's not the world we're going to be living in 3 years. It's not the world we live in now. And we need to see that we have resources and we can't just be throwing those away. So I just became really quick to decompress by sorting the trash in my garbage can. My compost heap started to work. And then my family had a zero waste Hanukkah and we were really proud of that. It's really hard to keep going, but any amount of trash that I can take out of a landfill on Nisenan land means that when we reach the land back goal, the land we're giving back will be better than what I was able to leave it. And that's the least I can do, I think, is where I'm at with it today.
Can you briefly explain what junk journaling is for people who may not know what that is?
Junk journaling to me seems to be a reaction to scrapbooking. In my day, you would go to a Michael's and your mom would buy these kinds of papers and then she had this special book and then she glued these things down in very aesthetically designed ways and everybody's mom was doing that. And then there was like this Amy Poehler bit where she was scrapbooking and she was even scrapbooking her Kleenexes because it had gotten so out of control. I kind of saw junk journaling evolve from that, but it seems to be something that the TikTok kids are working on now that just looks really great. You know, you get ticket stubs, you get something special, you're at a cool coffee shop and you have something and you take it home and you glue it in a book and you can make that book yourself. You don't have to go buy that book. Everything doesn't need to be this precious thing you get at Michael's or wherever you buy your art supplies. It can be things in your house. My friend was really interested in trying it. She showed it to me and I was like, I have all that kind of garbage. And I wanted to just make her a Hanukkah present. That was my first trash project, was making my friend Kaylee a little Hanukkah junk journal out of a cereal box and some paper and mailed that to her and she really enjoys it. Then I made more kits that for a while were available on my website and it's just a little pack and you know, you can use your own junk. You don't need to buy it from me. It's not mysterious. It's just a glue gun and some garbage, but you can save your precious memories. You can write things and you can be really low stress about your design. You don't need to be an artist. You just need to have a glue stick and maybe a glue gun and some verve.
Can you just give a couple of examples of what made the Hanukkah zero waste?
Jake started in Colorado and in the Christian culture. He was never Christian, but you know, he has a Christmas tree and a Christmas thing going on. And then when he adopted me, he decided to become Jewish. He went through the bar mitzvah. We celebrate Jewish holidays and we have a Jewish household. And so we don't want to not have his pink Christmas tree that he's had since he was 2. And we don't want him to not have presents like a 1950s Jewish kid used to complain about. We want him to have all of that. And his mother's love language is gift giving. And so he gets a lot of presents. And so do I. And it's lovely. Thank you, Cindy. And when you order a box from Jeff's big store there, you know, it comes with all this really great brown paper that you can iron and fold up and turn into a book. And the plastic that comes off of it can be ironed if you're wearing like the right kind of mask and you can turn it into fabric. And so everything that came with the Hanukkah presents, I was able to work into some kind of art or is now ready to be used as an art supply. We started composting around then too, because we were all becoming very aware of the garbage can because no one was allowed to throw anything away without me inspecting it first and seeing what use it could have. And so as things were leaving, there was like a little side thing for me to inspect before it went into the garbage. And I mean, we still throw away the meat, the wrapping that came around any meat we ordered, that sort of thing. But generally, if it could be saved, we saved it, we reworked it, and it became something else. And our garden grew. And I got to use the compost from that time of year for repotting plants earlier this month. So it was a good experience. And it really changed our relationship with our garbage can. And we're really much more thoughtful about what we're throwing away now. And when, you know, before anybody throws anything away cool, they come by and ask me if I want it. And I get to think about it. And I think that's been a really positive, profound impact on us.
That's amazing. That's the amount of effort that goes into that. It's a stressful time of year, the holiday season, to save things, and there's so much trash, but also just like, are we keeping this gift? Are we regifting? Like, it's a great time actually to think about using everything that comes into your home. So
We're supposed to be doing liberation right then, too. And when I look around at my North American white lady life, which I'm sort of compelled to be complicit in, there's not a lot of opportunities to choose to do some form of resistance. But once I started reclaiming packaging from Amazon, I really felt like I was stealing from Jeff. Like he didn't intend for me to use it that way. He didn't intend for me to find a way to make money. And I did. I won. I won that round. How it felt. And it was a really nice fuel. And that's a time of year when you're supposed to be looking for fuel. And so it fueled.
how can we actively infuse liberation into our daily life in the ways that you're suggesting, but maybe there's more that we could be doing every day?
I think we tried that in the early aughts. And I think that we really need to flip the perspective and we need to be thinking about how we infuse our daily life into our liberation practice. This is a question that people have been asking a long time because we have to continue to feed our kids and right? We have to do all that stuff. We've known that since industrialized oppression began. But in order to really deconstruct this industrialized oppression, we have to step out of it in our minds as much as we can. And we have to do it constantly. And we have to do it in every way all the time. And so for me, it's been about flipping that script. I'm a weird, wrong patrilineal Jew. And then when Jake adopted me, we went and, dotted the I's and crossed the T's. So I'm fairly new to Judaism, but not Jewish life. And so I treat Judaism as an art supply. And I've been finding those messages of liberation and working them through into the art and trying to get those out into the world. Isn't that what wearing a kippah is saying? There's something above me. I care about the liberation first, and then I live my life from there. And that's what the higher the hair, the closer to God means, right? Like I care about liberation first, and then it comes through me. I don't think we can do how do I sneak my liberation in? Although people who have 9-to-5 jobs should definitely be sneaking some liberation in as much as they can. Throw a little shoe into the works, burn some rosemary on that.
I love the idea of Judaism as an art supply. And I think that's so brilliant to think of how Judaism can enhance the work we're already doing out in the world. In what ways are Jewish institutions supporting our path to liberation? And in which ways are they hindering that?
From my position, I'm seeing these sort of two kinds of Jewish institutions right now, right? Like the big mega ones and the sort of neo ones. I do think that there are a lot of leaders within these institutions that are, both of them, doing a lot of hard work to try to meet people where they are. And they have that intention to meet people where they are. And the thing that I wish from the mega institutions is that they would be less money driven. And when we were going to a temple, it was about who was donating the most money and they were on the board and what is it that they wanted. And that those people were the representatives of the rest of the community, but those were also the people that kind of didn't have the best listening skills. At the same time, we were hearing Black Jewish women say, this institution isn't working for me. And it's the canary in the coal mine. When a Black woman is saying, you're not listening to me, it means you don't have listening skills. And then in sort of neo institutions, they were so good, but it wasn't going to work. So we're seeing these sort of neo online institutions start to rise and come through. And I really credit to those people who are kind of working to do something away from what has always been done and trying to try something new and trying to connect with communities in new ways and trying to connect with people like me in sort of this deep diaspora situation and find new ways for us to participate. And then I also see those institutions getting caught up in just the hegemonic culture's insistence that we all have a brand and that we all work through branding and communicate in branding. But unfortunately, branding itself is a feature of white supremacy. When I had a job, I had to be professional in the 9 to 5 context of professional. And now I'm rebuilding my career and I have to learn how to be professional in the context of being a creator. And this is supposed to increase my freedom, but it isn't increasing my freedom because I'm being held to this algorithm's expectations in order to get anyone to hear me. And it makes me want to scream because I'm supposedly part of this community and my voice is supposedly important. I shouldn't have to scream. And I shouldn't have to go to these lengths where I'm like, a brand costs thousands of dollars to execute. And even if you execute it all yourself, that's why I call myself a fine artist, is because I do all of my own stunts. Everything I'm making, I am making from garbage. And if you all can agree with me that cleaning up a landfill is important, then I need you to understand how far back it is I have to stand to start with the garbage. And I'm still white. And there are people who are way far behind me who don't have the privilege of having lived as not a trans person for the first 20 years of their adulthood, who cannot reach you, who are screaming, who cannot reach you. And it's a listening skills problem. And I don't want to tell anybody they're failing. I want to tell them it's a listening skills problem. I could give you a specific example without naming names if that would be interesting. I'm particularly constructive sometimes at reaching cis white women because I can cosplay as a cis white woman, and it's one of my adjacent identities. And so I was really participating in Rosh Hodesh, and I think sometimes cis white women feel like maybe they own Rosh Hodesh a little bit too much. And there's an organization that creates Rosh Hodesh materials, and they put something out that I found was a little transphobic, and I reached out to them to let them know that I felt that way. And they said, well, here are some resources about how to be a trans man. And that just really missed the mark. And it really lost my ability to communicate with them. Like, I appreciate them acknowledging that being a trans fella is hard. But first off, you don't know that I'm a trans man. You know, I'm telling you that there's a phobic there. And then secondly, I don't need your resources. I invented being a trans fella. Thank you. I didn't. Like, which one of us is Redstone Butch Blues? It wasn't you.
I appreciate you saying that. And I think it's important to name the dynamics that are happening in the community, whether we name names specifically or not, because so many people feel it's their own personal experience and everybody else is in on it. And we're all just like walking around harmed by these institutions, being like, oh, I guess it's just me. I guess I'm the problem. And in actuality, these institutions marginalize many of us and they thrive on us not communicating about it because that would do damage to the institution, you know? So I really appreciate you sharing your story. And I'm so sorry that was your experience. And Rosh Chodesh is for everyone, okay? Like, there's a lot of like gendered stuff around it, but it is not in the Torah like, oh yeah, this is only for cis women. So I'm so glad you're bringing that up, honestly.
I have this experience too with a lot of it's the plural of havruta, havrutot, with my havrutot, where I like to find out from them, are you weird or am I? Which of us is normal? And you know, wait till you know somebody pretty well, but it's kind of an interesting thing to sit with somebody who's maybe was raised really in the culture, and for them to kind of start with the impression that I'm a weird Jew, but then they're a weird American. And neither of us is really weird. We both have to pay our electric bill. And just finding that like commonality in that, like, we do all have we're all complicit in this system to start with, is something we all share. And we're, as Jewish people, I expect, what I want from my fellow Jewish people is for us to all care about this land that we live on and to work on it.
And you brought up too before the pressure to be a brand and kind of the algorithm of it all. Can you tell us a little bit about the concept of algorithmic solidarity?
Yeah, that's not something I invented, but I coined it just after, like, on day 3 of the raids in Los Angeles. I was starting to go into comments on Instagram and just type out algorithmic solidarity, because one of the things we know about Instatalk and anywhere that there's a video is that watch time is important. I think it's just this attempt to describe the ancient practice of cutting out little newspaper clippings and mailing them to our friends. And there's a lot of advice for creators and artists about how to get this to work. It's why design was invented. It's always been hard to communicate a story. It's why we did all of this work. And we developed symbols and language and everything. All of this is a human effort to share my perspective and hear yours so that we can get that pot to come back together and unify divinity or whatever it is we're up to. And design itself has been co-opted by white supremacy and capitalism. And in the solar punk future of our dreams, it will be much easier to share. But for now, we really need to start seeing that the algorithms that shape our lives are absolute garbage. And they're designed to enshittify our experience, and they're designed to make us malleable. And they're very good at that. But we also know that we can look around at capitalism systems that were created quite lazily. We can see these systems are created lazily. They have no place in the universe. And we know they're susceptible to witchcraft. And we can just start to fertilize that shit. And that's what I think we need to do is we just need to fertilize these algorithms. We need to work together. And there are tangible actions that can be taken from the point of view of the audience. And so algorithmic solidarity is kind of a thing I just do in the middle of the night when I'm anxious, is I'll just go and try to do algorithmic solidarity. But it's also a call in to people who are all of us when we are in the position of audience, to actually clap at the end of the play. And to think about how we need to do that in the digital space, because we have stopped doing that. We no longer have to. It tells us we don't have to anymore. And that's not true.
I feel like this directly relates to disposability politics as a concept, as a form of violence. And so the question I have now would be, how do you feel like everything you just said about algorithmic solidarity, barriers to listening, and just generally living lives digitally, how do you think disposability politics plays a role? And just to put that more plainly for anybody who hasn't heard that term before, I'm going to cite from an article by the person who coined the term, who said that the politics of disposability is a politics in which the unproductive, quote, the poor, weak, and racially marginalized, are considered useless and therefore expendable, a politics in which entire populations are considered disposable, unnecessary burdens on state coffers, and consigned to fend for themselves. So relating that to the conversation about other algorithmic solidarity, what are your thoughts on that?
I think when we're talking about brand, I think one of the things I was trying to say was that professional spaces are an output of white supremacy. And my experience has generally been that when people don't like the reality behind my message, they pretend like they can't hear me. It's inconvenient. I mean, Al Gore called it an inconvenient truth, right? And so what people immediately did was make fun of Al Gore and stop listening to him and just shut him down. Where's Al Gore now? Well, and also he Al Gore, but they make it a consent issue, right? Because if you're making me scream at you, I'm not going to. So you can't ethically keep shouting at someone who doesn't want to hear you. That's not a way to be. But we can't allow the capital to continue to exist in the hands of people who won't listen either. And when I was in a professional space, I mean, just recently I resigned from my position because I was in a role where my responsibility was to say, this system is broken and here's how we can fix it. And I would write my little emails, the system is broken and here's how we can fix it. And they would go to my boss and he would forward them to his boss and they would just do nothing and they would never write back. And I'd say, can I have more money, please? And they would not write back. And you don't get anything out of people. You don't improve your system. You don't make anything better by just shutting people down. And so I think if I see algorithmic solidarity as one possible response to this, that we can compost these systems and we can uninstall them by refusing to let a computer tell us that we should be doing that. Like a computer should certainly not be telling you that you should throw someone away. And that's what it says to you when it's just like, oh, are you bored? Scroll. You've got, did you not like their hook? Don't listen. Oh, their call to action didn't work for you. Don't listen. Don't click. You don't leave the app. Well, they can't even ask you to leave the app without us. You can flag them and tell us they told you to leave the app and we will block them and you will never see them again. And their irritating voices. Oh, do children starving on your computer make you sad? Just ignore it. And it's Also, I don't want to get too practical because the algorithm always changes, but you can watch a video, you can play a video without watching it. You can see, here's a starving child who needs my support. And one thing you can do is let the video run 3 or 5 times while you're cooking dinner for your children who get to eat all the time. And you don't have to internalize it just because it's on your screen, but you can still boost this person. And I think that the average non-creator Insta-talk consumer doesn't understand that just having it up on the screen or is the single most important thing you can do to let someone else see that video. And that someone else might be the person with the $5 bill this month. So let them give the $5 bill we've all been passing along to this person this time. And don't just look away. I mean, actually go ahead and look away, but keep your screen looking. That's something we really need to be doing. And like, don't just reflexively run from ideas you don't want to engage with. Just take a second and work on building that muscle. And it is a muscle. And we can, what did I say? Compost. We can compost it.
I think this is so, so important because burnout is real on social media, right? Like people get burnt out thinking, okay, I have to interact this way, or I have to share this mutual aid fund, or I have to do this. And then people just stop. And I think we saw that many times throughout this most recent iteration of the genocide in Gaza is right. Like people were super active and showing up to meetings and sharing things, and people were talking about it, and then it would wane for a few months, and then it would be revived again, and then it would wane. And so I'm really curious about your perspective on righteous anger. And you suggest that people should focus on their righteous anger instead of their grief. So is this some way that it might manifest, that kind of the suggestions you're giving us, or what might that look like in practice?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of kinds of grief. And if you have a recent deceased loved one, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking about the grief of the month of Av and the grief at this loss of this thing you're all calling Israel that was never real. Like, it is really hard. I've had to do it to look at your grandmother and realize she's a war criminal. And yet, if your grandmother's a war criminal, your grandmother's a war criminal. And so do it, get it over with, look at that thought, hold it, make some art about it, and then move on. And that art will be very good. And you can go back and you can look at it. You can make more art about it. You can bring it in. Don't let that suffering go wasted. I'm not saying don't feel grief. I'm saying Jessie liked something recently from Yafa that popped up on my Instagram, and they were explaining this concept of kaher, which is this emotion that's beyond the grief and rage when you're looking at inhumane realities and just feeling really helpless, and that it's beyond that. And I was so happy to find that as we were bringing together these ideas, because that's where we need to get to. And I tell my kid all the time, right? Like, anger is usually a secondary emotion. There's usually a primary emotion, like that thing is making you sad. And it's usually worth understanding that that thing is making you sad. But then anger is the moving force. Anger is the fire and the spirit and the driving. And so go ahead and let the sadness fall into anger. Stop being afraid of yourself being angry. And I know how hard that is, because that can lead to internalizing that anger, which can lead to, self-harm thoughts and all that. Stop doing that and go loot a Home Depot. Just take what you need from there and go build a garden and let your phone run some videos while you're gardening. And just, I don't mean don't feel your feelings, but feelings take 20 minutes. So have your 20 minutes of feelings and then get back to work. And speaking about Av and speaking about these couple month things, I think some of the Jewish resistance calendar groups, you guys are part of one of those, probably do a really good job at connecting the resistance to the Jewish calendar. One of the things I was just screaming in my mind about this year was the way everybody wasn't ready at graduation for things to blow up. Things blow up at graduation. There is an annual cycle. We have been resisting since before the French Revolution. There is a rhythm to it. There are lulls. And I think too, maybe as activists, we need to respect that when there are lulls, that doesn't mean the work is stopping. It means we're learning again. and we're reflecting. So last year, everybody was doing encampments. And so I was part of an encampment here, and it was great at first. And then we had some things that we learned, and those things we've got to disseminate. And what I noticed as well was that everybody else in the country was trying encampments and learning very similar things to what we learned. And when the encampment ended and that process, when it was breaking down, when the community that was supporting it was breaking it down, we were all learning quite a bit. And we were very stressed with each other, and the community felt like it was breaking apart. It wasn't breaking apart. We were all stepping away to have our own learnings, much like the previous year when we had all gone and protested to try to save a Planned Parenthood from the Proud Boys and hadn't expected the police to turn up. We all had a lot of learnings. So then we learned when our camp was infected with white supremacy, that white supremacy is everywhere. And then this summer, we're going to try a bunch of stuff, and everything I'm telling you to try this year is going to fail, because of course it does, because the forces we are working against are so great, but we still have to just try everything. And then at the end of the year, we are going to be cold, and we're going to want to stay inside, and we're all going to be mad at each other again. And so we just got to keep learning. And we've got, there was this like, oh, the queer ancestors or the millennials, like, sorry, but I am getting smarter, and I will get there by the time I'm 60, and I will have something to say if I make it to 60. So it's just kind of moving it forward year over year. And the work that your group and other groups are doing to make like a resistance calendar is so important, because I think as we start to really codify that and look at it across cultures and across the cultures that are impacting North America and the United States specifically, and then here specifically, and then this land specifically, that we're really going to see that there's an ebb and flow to it, and we're going to have that documented. And I think we're going to be stronger once we have that knowledge.
I just want to say that everything that you just said was actually a beautiful illustration of how composting works, from the lulls to the ebbs and the flows to the breakdowns to the coldness. Like, compost isn't made in a day. You have your nematodes, you have your microarthropods, you have your fungi, you have all of these different microbes in these compost piles that are working together. They're doing their quorum sensing, they're figuring things out to find out how they can best work to their strengths to turn the waste into, to black gold. And so I just loved that was just beautiful to me that you were literally describing compost in this really wonderful way. So thank you for that illustration.
I didn't know that. That's great.
Something that came to mind to me when you were talking was just this idea of not letting our emotions go to waste, which kind of led into what I just said about the illustrating the compost.
I love, first of all, as somebody who firmly fights against anger being a secondary emotion too, I'm always like, no, it's core to my being because I'm always angry. I think specifically gendered ideas around anger and letting yourself feel angry and all of that, like
Racial ones too.
Racial ones too, who gets to be publicly angry as well, and like who has the right to their own anger, I think is like a path we could delve down as well. So I'm curious, in this discussion about compost and waste and disposability politics, can anger be transformed into something sustainable?
Hi there, it's Alana. Just a heads up that this next section contains discussion of suicide and self-harm. If you'd rather skip that, go to
41 minutes and 57 seconds.
As an abolitionist therapist, relying on the cops and carceral institutions to support individuals who are struggling is not part of my praxis. If you or someone you love is struggling, please check out the link in the show notes to Inclusive Therapists resource list.
How can we
41 minutes and
collectively
57 seconds.
approach how we're navigating through all of this while we're trying to infuse our daily lives into our liberatory practice?
If I were talking to the version of myself that went to therapy the first time, if I were my first therapist, I went in there because I could describe that I would see the color red and then find a knife in my hand. I'm so used to feeling censored about having suicidal thoughts and feelings that I'm dancing around talking about it, but you're nodding at me like I'm allowed to talk about it here. So that was what drove me to therapy the first time is I had this flash of red and then there was a knife in my hand. And then I was on the road and I wanted to spin my car off. And there were just a couple really crisp, clear ways of getting the job done that would have been very effective that came to mind. And that level of planning was the point at which I always told myself I'd need to go to therapy. That was my line because in 2000, you had to have some reason to go to therapy. You couldn't just go because everybody should go. And so I went, and the therapist, for better or worse, helped me see that my anger was coming inside, that I didn't have a way, that I wasn't putting my anger outside of me because it wasn't safe. And if I had put my anger outside of me, I would have used it to attack people who were oppressing me, and then they would have squished me. And that was also another great way to maybe do some suicide. And so there just wasn't the only thing I could get to in that cycle by myself was that I was trapped, there was the color red, and I should go. And so if I were talking to that person now, what I've learned since is that you need to embody it. You know, you need to give it space in your body. And this is a very Jewish thing, right? You need to like move through it. You need to dance through it. And for me, that was holding a paintbrush with a canvas. And I ended up drawing my queerness, which I didn't know about. And I made this very un I love the painting, no one else does, it really upsets my mom. Um, but this really beautiful painting, really expressive brush strokes, and I finished it and I saw all of the reasons I ever wanted to not be here on it, and I was able to move forward and say, "This thing," and understanding what is behind this piece and why it looks the way it looks and what's in here is what I'm here for, and this pain that I've got in this piece, I'm supposed to resolve it, and I've resolved it artistically and compositionally, and now I can see it as a thing to react to, and now not everybody hates it. Other people, it's not, it's the first painting. It's someone's first painting, okay? But people look at it and go, that's an experience I have. And I feel pulled the way this self portrait describes a tearing. And people who get it, people who want to erase me look away, but people who get it look at it and they get it and they're also here to resolve it. And so I have some deeper purpose here. And so what that showed me is my anger has some deeper purpose. And as I'm continuing to work through it and I'm here now, what I'm also seeing is that I'm so indebted to the Black people around me, and the Nisenan, the Miwok, and the Maidu who lived here, and that I live here without their consent, and I owe them something, and that what I have is this anger, and so what I owe to them is to figure out how to use this anger towards something. And every day I wake up and I do something. And is that the right thing? I don't know, but it's something. And then I have, did this podcast. I'm going to get off this podcast and I'm going to try to do something. And then I'm going to rest and I'm going to try to do something. And that's it. That's what it's for. And then I don't know what other people's anger is for, but that's what mine is for. And anybody who wants to like join me and using their anger towards that, it's July 27th is Reclaiming Her Time Day. Thank you.
Thank you so much for everything that you just shared. I just want to say that everything was so resonant. I had a very similar experience too. I was in anger management for years, actually. And it was really interesting because in a lot of the group therapy sessions, there were some people who primarily or exclusively had their anger go inward. I was one of those. And then there were others who their anger was just always like towards other people with the attacking and it was interesting talking about how our sources of anger were often the same. And this kind of made me think back to what we were talking earlier about, if we approach these feelings collectively instead of individually. I was reminded of this interview with Bell Hooks where Bell was talking about composting anger, like composting your own anger though, And one of my dreams eventually is to write a critique of that, because I feel like if we looked at it less individualistically and really thought of it as like, it's not like we're just angry for no reason. It's not like we're grieving for no reason. Like, these are valid, helpful responses to what we're being forced to try and survive through. And when we look at it like that, it really has us go like, so what do we do? And honestly, this conversation is an example. I feel like even conversations about suicidal ideation, about suicidality generally, about seeing the red and grabbing the knife, those are conversations in general that are just so often like either, oh, we just don't talk about that, or like, oh, if people are talking about that, then they're necessarily a problem. We need to necessarily incarcerate them and do this and do that and do this and pathologize and this and that, instead of just being like, let's just talk, actually, and practice our listening skills, like you were talking about earlier, and see what this is telling us about how we're trying to get through. And so, yeah, thank you for everything that you shared and for your honesty. For real.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a German poet wrote a poem about wanting to jump off a bridge because of love. And I guess a bunch of people jumped off the bridge because of love. And so I think that might be part of the original like fear about talking about suicide. Like, if I talk about how good feeling suicidal made me feel when I felt it, because it was the only way I was allowed to experience anger, that it might inspire someone else to do the suicide because they also want to lean into how good it feels. It feels the same good to make art with it. You don't need to go that way. And we really don't want you to. We love you. We're sorry the people around you suck. Please come hang out with us and like just make some art. It's cool. Unlike the forces want us hungry and suicidal and tired. And so they tell us we can't do that. And then they put in our psyche, oh, there's a German poet who says, or oh, you'll inspire, or you'll make everyone sad if you, and there's something wrong with you. No, there's not. It's, you're absolutely right, Jesse. There's a reason we get angry, and it's helpful.
So, who and what are your primary sources of inspiration in your current artistic practice?
I am a I am a very inspired by post-war World War II German and World War One German expressionism. Katie Kolowitz, Bertolt Brecht, just a lot of people who were in the drafted German army, or in complicit and forced to be in world German politics and civil life at the time, who then attempted to resist it. And Elizabeth Langesser is a Jewish German author who wrote a novel in a concentration camp. People kind of in that group of artistic work. And I'm an expressionist, so it's about putting it down and expressing the sensation. And their way of doing it was to really keep it short and crisp, and to really use as little. There's this story Bertolt Brecht wrote about, it's called Das Brot, the bread. And it's a look of a woman looks into the kitchen. She watches her husband steal the last piece of bread. And the story is told about that quickly. It's a page in a book. It's the moments she's describing it. It's short, simple sentences. And their point with working that way was, this was the land of thinkers and poets. And look what we've become. Look what we've done. And we need to, it just cut all of the form and all this time thinking of being floral. All of that is just bullshit. What there is, this stark world we live in, and they were so committed to looking at it. And Katie Kolowitz did these beautiful woodcuts of like mothers with their dying sons. Her sons were soldiers in World War One, and so she does these great woodcuts that are really dark about like starving people. And I am trying to get to that earlier in this cycle rather than after. I'm kind of using it at the dawn of it. So that's one of my big influences. And then I'm also really inspired by Black women, and I'm really concerned about Black women who are not, I'm not concerned that they're doing this. I'm concerned for the rest of us, that Black women are talking now about opting out of community. I think that that is probably an extinction level event on par with climate change. I think that like we and when I say we, in this case, white North American people really need to do everything we can to make space for Black women in society. Speaking of things that were great a week ago and don't make sense anymore, I really want us to address the wage gap. Someone was saying on an Insta talk I saw earlier today that all of the jobs that Black women historically have relied on are gone anyway. So maybe we need to like dig a little bit deeper than the wage gap even, but we need to be solving problems for Black women proactively. And so I'm really trying to access the thoughts that Black women are bringing to the forefront. And I'm trying to be, one of the reasons I like to work with garbage is I feel like it's not appropriating. It is appropriating, but the garbage already did the appropriating. Why are there more Mexican inspired dishes from mega brands in my garbage now that this is happening than there were before? And they're all white and kind of whitewashed anyway. So I'm trying to like find that balance as I always should have been. And I'm trying to do what I'm being told to do. And I'm trying to set the example of doing what I've been told to do, sort of to be the first follower in that, so that we don't have to have the same conversation when we're done being mad at each other next year. I see myself as this person between 6 generations back and 6 generations down. And so I'm kind of trying to pull everybody together into, so I like just, I don't know how to describe that movement. I'm sorry. And then I'm also just feeling my undiagnosed invisible disability quite viscerally right now. So that's inspiring a lot of my work. So for listening to Black women, I have invented a concept, a holiday. It's called Reclaiming Her Time Day. We celebrate it on July 27th because that's when Maxine Waters went viral for saying she's reclaiming her time. She reclaims her time all the time because she has been a congresswoman fighting for the people in California for 40 some years. And so I think that should be a great day to celebrate the contributions of contemporary Black women. And what you can do is just give a Black woman money on that day. She can go get her nails done. You can organize your own damn potluck. You can tell your boss about the wage gap. I don't care. But Reclaiming Her Time Day is a celebration of contemporary Black women, not historical Black women, not dead Black women. Much respect to them. Contemporary Black women doing the work right now, and we need to be uplifting those voices. So July 27th. So by the time this podcast gets to you, it'll probably be Yom Kippur. So lock that into your brain. Get on it. And then the next thing I'm doing is I'm working on an exhibit in Dropbox. It's just hundreds of images of stuff that looks normal to me, and it asks who's normal, me or you. And I'm inviting people to collage with the materials. And what I'm finding is that that is a really interesting body of work about suburbia on top of Nisenan land, and the ways Nisenan land is kind of popping up and coming through and fighting to exist. And I don't know which plants are native and which plants are invasive, and I'm invasive, and so it's all just kind of muddled together. But as I'm trying to show this in my Dropbox folder, it's really coming together, and it's something. And I want to see other people collage with it or work with it in design. And I'm making it available to like cohort groups, the Torah Studio project. And I have a little partnership that's coming up that they're going to be able to offer it to their cohorts, so that what they want is to kind of collage from all the same images. And so I'm excited to be able to offer to that group, and other cohorts could certainly be in touch about that. And then because of the invisible disability, I did a migraine light study that I'm very proud of. And it just kind of explores, I did some recordings and I'm doing some work, and I'm going to do some paintings on having a migraine. And I wrote some stuff about it. And it's been a long, long migraine with a trip to the urgent care. It's my first one, and it's been really hard and really dark. And I've been waking up at 4 a.m. wishing I could go to Home Depot, but not being able to get out of bed. And I want to capture that frustration again, so that next year, when everyone says, "Where was Liz?" I can say, "I was here." And this is what I'm struggling with, because COVID is so real, and long COVID is real, and long disability is real. And I am trying to come up with all these ways for disabled people to get involved, but we also need able people, not yet disabled people, to see that this part of the struggle is also going to sink us. So that's what I'm trying. Thanks for letting me say that.
I'm so grateful you said that. I wish we had asked more questions about that. I feel, and we can chat more about it, but at first, just because you said if people want to get in touch, what is the best way for people to connect with you if they would like to be involved in your work?
Sure. So the easiest thing is to be my real friend, and you can email me at picklestobetsy@gmail.com. And it's like TO. So give the pickles to Betsy at gmail.com, pickles to Betsy at gmail.com. And then my website is lizawesome.art. And I'm also experimenting with Instagram, TikTok, and Substack, but I'm not committed to staying on Instagram, TikTok, and Substack. So the other two ways are the best. And if you become my real friend, you become a person I send a lot of art to. Just, do you like this? So thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, sorry. Jumping back in just quickly to what you were sharing about disability politics around activism and like being seen in the movement, I think is a fascinating one because there are like a few people, like Micah Bazant is often talking about like how disability impacts the ability to like make movement art, but then also the labor of creating that art and needing time after and needing time before, and people not understanding like, okay, like, can you just keep producing or can you just keep making stuff for us? I'm just so grateful that you're sharing your own experience with this and excited to explore more of this with you.
I definitely am not capable of speaking on behalf of anybody else with a disability. Mine's invisible, and I've started to do some things to really kind of track it and pay more attention to it. And that's been a huge help for me. And then I don't know if other people feel this way, but I feel like I out of respect to people who are more disabled than me, I become useless in disability conversations, which is something that I don't have the perspective to work on yet. But everything takes 6 days. Every single thing takes 6 days. And I think you hear, oh, it's hard for me to take a shower. I don't think you hear, oh, it takes 6 days for me to take a shower. Or like, I'm so fortunate to have figured out a lifestyle that works and a pace of life and to have the support that I need and do. But my family packed up and moved from Colorado to come live with me when I got COVID the first time. And not everybody can have people just come move from Colorado. And even if you do, it's not enough, and it doesn't negate anything. It just means now there's somebody that helps me with my food, and then there's a child I have to be extra careful not to verbally abuse around me. I think I'm doing pretty good at that, and he thinks I'm doing good at that, but it's, it just, it adds all these complications to have these emotions and work through them. And I don't even know what it is to live in a wheelchair. My place has stairs. I knew when I was buying a place that had stairs, and I knew that I wasn't always going to be able-bodied when I bought it, but it was the only place on the market that I could afford. It was the cheapest place on the market that I could live in at the time, and I was lucky to get it. It is so complicated, and it's so individual. And you're absolutely right when you touched on the resistance machine needs the work I produce, but I simultaneously can't get opportunities to produce it anywhere, and have to produce too much of it to make it as meaningful as I want to. And that also goes back to, I can't just give you a piece of art. I have to tell you the story behind the piece of art, and I have to put it on some design, and I have to get it printed on a t-shirt, and I have to make sure the t-shirt it's printed on isn't fast fashion. And and it's just such a monumental task that, yeah, like, just it goes back to listening skills and who are we listening to? And it's not the puzzle people for the autism crew. It's the people with autism who lived through it in childhood and grew up into adults. And those are the people who have something to say, not their moms.
Absolutely. Yeah. I could jump down this rabbit hole too.
I'm Black and autistic, and I use a mobility aid, and I live in a fourth floor walk up. So basically,
Oh, let me get out of your way, please.
no, just everything you were saying, I'm just like, yup, 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 literally. And it's always the autism moms that have so much to say. There's so much to say, so much to say. And the minute you remind them, that autistic children become autistic adults, right? Who like have things to say. Yeah, then it's an issue. Given everything that you've said while you're, navigating life as somebody who's making sense of their own experiences of disability. How, if at all, do you think that informs your artistic praxis, how you approach it, etc.?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because it has to be accessible, right? It has to be. I did watercolors in bed once. When I had COVID, actually, when I had COVID the first time, I was alone here and I had all my TV trays. You know, you're supposed to rest. If you have COVID, you're supposed to rest. If you have COVID and you think Paxlovid is right for you, you need to email me if you need help advocating for it. You deserve these things. That's important. Okay, but then I got all the TV trays out and I laid on the couch and I fell asleep on one side of the couch. And then when I got antsy, because when you are ill in the way that people with disabilities are ill, your mind is still running. You're still having all these things, these shoulds, and all these wishes you want to do. And you have to prioritize everything you do. So you have to say, I'm going to get up. I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'm going to get a snack. I'm going to wash my face and I'm going to grab some art supplies. So I would like kind of do that. And then I was experimenting at that point with etching on soda cans. And I would cut apart the soda cans I was drinking. And inside a soda can, it's aluminum, but there's this like plastic wrap inside. And you can unroll that and flatten it out. And then you can etch into that plastic stuff. And then you can sit the aluminum into acid. And the acid will eat away at that. And then your image will be revealed. And then you can rub that into painting and you can make an intaglio print from that. And so I had that set up in my den while I had COVID with the acid bath over by the window. And I was kind of just churning out some mark making. And it is the first Hebrew word I wrote was shehekianu in that acid bath process and that process I just described. And then I drew some garlic and I did some mark making and I made some really precious works. And then when I lived alone, it was really easy. I kind of shaped the house so that there were just surfaces everywhere. So all the projects I lived with could just be on surfaces everywhere. And my family is very cool now. We understand that part of the house is my studio and I have that area, but there's this constant like moving furniture around that has to happen. You know, I guess there are artists out there that just are like, I'm going to do pretty girls' faces with this kind of ink and this kind of paper, and they can just set that up and they can just do that. I can't do that because I work with garbage. So that what comes out of the garbage can, I have to say, what is this going to be? And then I have to retool the space for it. And it's a lot of moving and junk everywhere and this constant challenge to make it accessible to myself, which I appreciate because it tunes me into how inaccessible the rest of the world is when I'm able to be in pedestrian mode. If we could just invert the economy to where the man at the temple accepts the art and then it's his job and he loves that job to make that art pop and go famous and he can explain it and he can tell the world the value of it and it's got to be a man, a cis man. I think we can expand it after that, but I think for now that's a service I would appreciate from them. And it's just like here, and then he takes that away and then it becomes shown, ooh, and then I'm out. That would be a great thing for me. But since I can't do that, I'm also trying to like the migraine study that I did, the video of the migraine study about the migraine study is the art. And so I have to try to make the sharing of it the art. You know, this is my first podcast, but really this should be the art. And I think that that is the only way for me. And then also laying around and feeling like a slug needs to be part of the art. And let's go back to composting, you know, and then I could compost that back into the art. And then also, isn't that a lot of pressure? Isn't it a big fucking ask to say, hey, Liz, go write a book while you're in a concentration camp? Like, fuck off. Like, why did she have to do that? Why do we have to do that? Just, ugh. I got lost and then I found my anger. I hope it was cute.
So cute.
Thank you.
I have a random follow-up. Do you ever work with organics in your artistic practice? One of my friends and I, she's a fiber artist. We do food scrap painting and food scrap dyeing and such. And so stuff like that. Like, what kind of organics are you using when you're going through your trash?
I like to dye with turmeric. With respect to the cultures that taught me about turmeric, I like to dye with turmeric. And then also, right now, I'm really working on this relationship with this tree. I live in a condo, it's an HOA. I wouldn't have chosen to live in an HOA, but this tree, it remembers the Nisenan and the Miwok and the Maidu, and we're across the street from a park. And so, one of the things I find really unsettling is that over here on the HOA, plants get treated a certain way, and over there on the city park, plants get treated a certain way, but we know that they're all talking to each other and they're all in the same system, and there's this political boundary right here. And so that definitely comes into my art. And if you stop by my Instagram, you'll see a lot of posts of me talking to local tree. I step out to my tree and I make sure it gets more water than the HOA thinks it needs, and I talk to it and I use its leaves a lot. In the fall, when the leaves fell, I brought those up and I made this non-patented plastiche technology that I didn't invent, but I work with. It's made out of plastic Walmart bags, and I iron them. It makes a kind of material that you can sew on, and that makes really great shofar bags. And so I'm working on making shofar bags with this material. But the tree, so I took the leaves and I sewed a leaf onto the plastic. I also sewed some leaves together. I worked with the leaves in some different ways. I also sewed a leaf onto a shirt and then did a dance. And then my son came home and he saw the ironed leaf on the plastic and he was like, "Oh wow, can I have this?" And anytime he likes one, that's the future, right? Like that's like when he has that response, or like I have another piece that makes babies laugh. And I'm like, I don't know what it is about this piece, but the children do. So there's some God in here that's needed in the future, right? And so this piece with the plastic and the leaf on it is really interesting because the leaf has dried out over time, but the plastic is forever. And so it's in his room and he's watching it decay. And I warned him that we were going to watch it decay and that part of owning it would be watching it decay. And it's very moving. I just love having this relationship with this tree in particular. And I talk to it and I ask it how we're going to live and how we're going to fight the HOA. And it has great ideas. And the birds in it come to me now. We have the Macmillans who eat our bird feed and come live in that tree. When the history books, God, let there be history books about this time, write about us, they're going to say one of the things we did was organic material with non-organic material and how we experimented with that. And I'm so excited and see all the ways we're doing it. What kinds of plants are you dyeing with besides the turmeric, please?
Onion skins, avocado pits, hibiscus, nettle, coffee grinds or grounds, all sorts of things.
And are you doing it on paper or fabric or both?
Both. Mostly fabric though. Yeah, mostly fabric. And honestly, it's a callback to Torah. What were they dyeing with back then? Organic materials, earth materials. Yeah.
That's why everything Jewish is blue, that and propaganda, because of the snail.
Yeah. About 30% of waste streams that are going to landfills throughout the country is organics that could have either been composted or repurposed into stuff like this.
Yeah. And like, that's ridiculous. I think people think that organics just decompose in the landfill, but they don't because they can't, because it's not there to do it. It's not like it's just like, oh, what? And then there's just Walmart bags there. No, it's just, it sits there and it's just gross.
Just
You should go see it. If you haven't ever gone to a landfill, go to a landfill. Wear shoes you don't care about. I mean, not you, but the viewing audience.
Yeah, don't wear shoes you care about. I was so silly. Your final question. If you could leave our listeners with one message, what would it be?
The destruction of Palestine was an experiment undertaken by the kind of people who have a hammer and think everything is a nail. And they're bringing that hammer now to the great American cities. Instead of sitting in despair, we need to be always moving to make the diaspora safe. In America, and I'm sure elsewhere in the world, that means proactively supporting Black people. Thank you.
You came ready.
That is the thing that I really need people to hear. That's just, and we need to stop hiding from it, and we need to face that, and we need to address it aggressively now and infuse proactively supporting Black people with your life.
And not just the black poop you find attractive. I always have to add that in there.
Oh, damn. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's another conversation entirely.
And we will get back there. That is great. I'm like, stay tuned, to be continued. No, this was phenomenal. Liz, thank you so much for joining us. Jesse, thank you so much for guest hosting this. And I'm
Awesome.
deeply hoping that we will do more of this guest interviewing too, because you were phenomenal. So
A virtual junk journaling activity together sometime. Like, how fun would that be? Yeah.
That would be so great.
Right? Like, maybe have everybody spend like a week just like collecting stuff from their week or something. And then we come together and junk journal together.
that's so cool.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Making Mention. Please consider supporting our work by funding us. You can find the donation link on our website, makingmenches.com. You can follow us on Instagram at Making Menches. We host monthly Shabbats both in person and online, so make sure to sign up for our newsletter, which is on our website, to get updates.
Making Mentions, the podcast, is produced by Alana Lipkin and Jesse Sander. Intro music is by Nate Sander. Editing by Jesse Sander.
My name is Alana, and I use they, them pronouns.
And my name's Jesse. I use she, her pronouns.
And we're Making
Menches. Making Menches is your home for queer, anti-Zionist Jewish ritual, radical education, and community.
My name is Alana, and I use they, them pronouns.
And my name's Jesse. I use she, her pronouns.
And we're Making
Menches. Making Menches is your home for queer, anti-Zionist Jewish ritual, radical education, and community.
My name is Alana, and I use they, them pronouns.
And my name's Jesse. I use she, her pronouns.
And we're Making
Menches. Making Menches is your home for queer, anti-Zionist Jewish ritual, radical education, and community.
My name is Alana, and I use they, them pronouns.
And my name's Jesse. I use she, her pronouns.
And we're Making
Menches. Making Menches is your home for queer, anti-Zionist Jewish ritual, radical education, and community.
My name is Alana, and I use they, them pronouns.
And my name's Jesse. I use she, her pronouns.
And we're Making
Menches. Making Menches is your home for queer, anti-Zionist Jewish ritual, radical education, and community.